concentration.
Recording in progress.
Like the concentration on your face to get that started was impeccable. Absolutely impeccable. Ladies and gents, 2 PTs, 1 podcast. Mike and Miles on a very blustery afternoon. We are going to discuss regressions and progressions when it comes to your training, and a sort of a bit of background on why you would do it at certain points. And then even if you are at the highest level of progression, why would you still need to regress?
Yeah.
That is not trying to say that people are ego driven with their training, because sometimes you need to go backwards.
To go forwards.
Exactamundo.
I thought we was having a moment there where I finished your sentences, but obviously, no, it wasn't. That's quite awkward.
There is lots of examples we can go into when we say this, in terms of one, we said, I got half a thing then, about a lat pull down. So obviously, you have a standard lat pull down, obviously, depending on the bar you're using, if it's like a mag grip or anything. But there's certain variations where if we wanted to go through the dynamic of a pull down and the movement that it would involve in terms of the actual dynamic of the arm path and everything else, you can make progressions in terms of progressing to a pull-up and then a weighted pull-up, or a regression in terms of the format of your grip. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit more involvement from something like the bicep when you're going into a supinated grip. I always love the analogy of going and explaining supinated grip. It's like, imagine holding a bowl of soup. Oh, soup, supinated.
Oh, right. I was wondering where you're going with that, but I was like, I don't think I've ever explained it like that. But then when you mentioned it like that, I kind of got it. I think one of the first reasons what we should go into is obviously why we have progressions and regressions in the first place. Obviously, let's say, for example, let's say you're starting the gym for the very first time. Movement in itself is very complicated. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot going on the outside as much as the inside. And when we are changing variables, so giving you different exercises, they might depend on range of motion, the complication of the movement, so how many joints are involved, so a compound movement for an isolation movement, and probably the stability that's also needed with it as well. So sometimes, like we've mentioned before in other podcast episodes, the use of free weights versus machines. Machines are a fantastic way of getting yourself in started, simply because there's less requirement of stability needed. So you can learn a movement through that kind of way before, let's use an example of a chest press or a bench press. You might get yourself started on a seated chest press machine before going into more of a dumbbell variation or even a barbell variation, because barbells going to require less stability than obviously dumbbell work, because it's obviously 2 different things. But that's an example you can use in that kind of format as well. But it doesn't have to even go through there. It could even be bodyweight work. We were just talking about before about the use of push-ups and pull-ups, and how just because they're body weight alone doesn't mean that they're any easier of performing itself. And the use of machines and weights can potentially help you along the line of that journey to push you to obviously get your first body weight push up, pull up, and stuff like that.
Obviously, I've just gone through the dynamic of using a machine to then progress to a bodyweight movement. But even within, say, a press up, you can progress and regress a push up in terms of kneeling, in terms of slow eccentric, in terms of weighted. This is before we even get any other equipment involved. And obviously, the dynamics, I think, of a lot of people going through doing a press up to then do a pushing movement, they change the game a lot in terms of where they should be positioned, and it's quite transferable. And it's, for as much as it's great going in and be like, yeah, no, progression's really good and everything else, there needs to be a certain degree of skill acquisition with everything that is new to you. There's no just point going in and be like, yeah, you know what, that looks fancy as shit. I fancy that. And then loading it up to a heavy point where the dynamic of what you're meant to be doing just completely breaks down and it runs the issue. Yes, you might have touched your toes in the past. Doesn't mean you should go and deadlift 100 kilos.
Yeah.
You could do a press up. Yeah,
And
great.
even still, even if you're someone who can lift up, let's say, a lift up 100 kg, there's different progressions through it. Obviously, you can say that in the skill of obviously the technique being performed as well. So, to even people might say, "Oh, progressions are only for beginners in that format." No, not at all. It's very much with the experienced type of people as well. We were saying before and stuff like this, there's other lacking points as well. You might get to a certain way where only that lacking point starts to show. And then when that lacking point starts to show, you have to break down the movement and therefore regress that movement to a point where you can strengthen that and then slowly build it back in so it's incremented. You can't just jump back into, let's say, that deadlift at that kind of weight simply because you haven't got the skill, as Mike just said, to perform that, but possibly the control and the strength for that as well.
Because it's also, I think people don't chase. No, sorry, I got that wrong in my head. People chase progressions in terms of changing movements, not progressions in optimizing a movement. You can literally sit in a movement and do the same movement for 4 or 5 years, and something can always be improved.
You look at
like go through it as a 2-week basis and be like, yeah, you know what, this is good. I'm going to go and do this because it's more complex. It's like, nah.
You look at let's say Olympians, and then let's say people who do Olympic lifts and stuff like that, they use and progress on a single exercise for years on. Some spend a whole career perfecting one movement. So if you're one of them people who are rushing to get to that end point, and I know a lot of people do, rush people to go to, like I said, the fancy stuff of deadlift, the barbell squats, shoulder press. The whole point of it, if you're going to be doing this for the long-term type of thing and longevity, just take your time with it, because the quicker you get to that point, remember, the quicker you increase intensity, the more likely inconsistency it's going to be. It's going to massive drop. So when it comes to progression of exercises, it's really important to obviously, have that in mind. Obviously, you want to obviously push things forward regarding your ability to lift. Because obviously, if you can handle more load across multiple joints, fantastic. That's great. But there's no proper desire, not proper desire, that's probably the wrong word. There's no probably rush to get to that point as soon as you possibly can. There's no race involved. You're not going to get a medal down the line for being the quickest to get a deadlift. It's about the enjoyment of obviously getting to that progress and stuff like that. And I think just halfway through from just saying that, I just thought that I think people, when we talk about progression and stuff like that, I think people will more seek to progress in weight rather than in form. Would you say that's a fair point to make?
Massively.
Oh,
You know what? People don't care. Be like, I've never seen a comment where it's like, oh yeah, no one puts a post on and be like, yeah, look how good my form is now in comparison to where it was. Yeah, but you're not lifting any heavier. Oh, I've gone up 40 kilos on a deadlift. Yeah, bro, that's amazing. Like, no one cares until it's something like significant. But then you're not going to get to them significant markers without doing the same stuff over and over. Because until everything's absolutely perfect, you're probably not even going to get anywhere close. There's no point coming through and then being like, your back's arching like David Beckham's free kick or Roberto Carlos's free kick around the wall for Brazil, and you're trying to deadlift like that. And it's like, how much progression do you think you're going to get under those conditions? I'm going to say very minimal. I think you can back me up on that as well.
Yeah, obviously there's in some degree, obviously if you some people can, so it's not like you're saying, it's not optimal and stuff like that, but there are obviously some studies that say otherwise and stuff like that, but that's for another discussion in itself.
That's bro lifting and bro science stuff.
Where you
It's
look
like
at
a-
you look at a Jefferson curl, for example, the spine's allowed to move. That's all I'm saying with regards to that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. But that's
Oh yeah,
that's
but
what I mean.
like
It's different
there's
complex.
that, and then there's that.
Yeah, there's it's like you said, it's like anything. It's like even if we go back to the deadlift, for example, I know we're going off a little bit off topic here,
So,
but you'll more likely see someone when they get near to that top level RM, there will be a slight curve going on and stuff like that. And it's not so much the degree of how that curves, it's how quickly that curve occurs. Same with like pronation and ankles and stuff like that. Like you'll naturally probably see pronation going on with sometimes females just because of obviously Q angles and how that affects it. But it's obviously not the pronation that happens. It's stuff like it's how quickly that pronation comes about and how you can rectify it and control it.
if I'm seeing it in the top third and the top quarter of a deadlift, that I'm more acceptable with. If I'm seeing it in the bottom 10th of the pull, I know something's wrong and you do not move that barbell. There's a certain degree of, yes, it's acceptable, but you need to know when it can be partially acceptable. Because that's just, I think, a lot of people, and then it gets in terms of like why people record. And it's like, well, you're not going to know. Your degree of what you think spinal flexion is could be, you're thinking you're doing that, same analogy, and you're just freaking that. And Walker's Chris have called you and they're asking for the quaver back. And
that's also a thing, like a great way of obviously examining that form, should we say, by video is because when we're focused and fixated on one thing, i.e., let's get in that way up, you might miss a load of things. And it's not until you see that video, look back, and you start going, okay, maybe this could be improved, maybe this could be done better and stuff like that. And it's your responsibility if you do see stuff like that to take it back. Doesn't mean you have to stop doing that exercise. We're not saying that in regards, but there could be other days where you, for example, work on that individual parts and stuff like that. It comes from the saying of the sum of his parts is greater than the whole.
There's 4 things I would look for in a video analysis of a deadlift. Well, 4 lines, sorry. Ankle to the knee, knee to the hip, hip to the shoulder, line of pull of the bar. Line of pull of the bar should really be as straight as possible to make it the most efficient. And that will be our basis on terms of, are we moving around that the most efficiently? And if you are lining from the hip to the shoulder like that, and your back is doing that, then we obviously know there's a certain degree of, yes, we're allowing a little bit. If it's too much, then for me, that's what I look for. And then you can put that as a sticking point and a determination point in terms of where you are moving it and if it's as effectively as it should be. Because obviously we look at it as knees over the bar. We look at it to the start of the hip position and look at it to the chest in relation to the bar and the rest of your body position. If you aren't looking for the markers between each of those points, does any of it make any difference? Probably not. I think if you were me and Miles, like, I'm quite anal when it comes to watching people deadlift because I will fine tune and fine tweak everything with the person to make sure that they are lifting as effectively as possible, as safely as possible, and as strong as possible.
Yeah, well, that's our job, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like we're enjoying doing that. But I was just about to say, Mike, when you were saying that and that and that, for people who are maybe not watching this on YouTube, maybe give some kind of relative angle degrees and stuff like that, just so audio people kind of know. It's perfectly right and stuff like that. Obviously, when you're looking at relatives to the bar and stuff like that, the bar should pretty much come up in a straight line and stuff like that. But we're going very much way off topic. This is not how to do a deadlift video podcast. This is how I progress and regression, which leads into my next topic: injuries.
Ooh.
And how to regress if you got an injury and stuff like that. Because obviously, let's say, for example, I've just said I'm finishing with a deadlift, but imagine if you've just done a deadlift and you've done your back, in a deadlift. Something's happened. You've gone ouch, and you now no longer can do a deadlift without your back giving you irritation, or possibly a lot of movements without doing irritation. Well, then where do you go from there? Because obviously you're not going to be able to go and do the same movement, because that movement now is a big no-no regarding pain, brain, and threshold and stuff like that.
You need to identify what it is that caused it first. Obviously, if you were walking down the street and your lower back tweaked for no apparent reason, there's obviously not. You're never going to get an injury just for the sake of something just happened. If you slept funny, you can put it down to body position. If you had a issue on one side of your lower back, is it something that's coming up from the hip? Have we got higher hips or anything? Is it going to transfer from there? What is the capable range that we can identify from each of these points to the lower back? And what is the potential range that we can work for the lower back? If we can assess that and be like, okay, yeah, we can go under some degree of load or some degree of movement through those positions, we'd put them in more controlled conditions. For me, anyway. So which episode was it when we went over? We were talking about dead bug. Was that last one or the one before?
It wasn't the last one. I think it was pain and how to deal with it. If you haven't watched that episode, by the way, you should watch it right now.
Yeah,
pause this episode right now. Go back and right. I've expected right now. You've gone and listened to that episode. Well done. Back to the episode now.
Back in the room. So yeah, obviously those kind of conditions and those kind of movements are going to be under controlled conditions. I'd just dial everything back in terms of, okay, what is a safer way to be able to test the range that we can move through in those injured conditions? Obviously, if it's absolutely fucked, do talk to a physiotherapist, do take some advice. If you are in the position where you want to start, you can start training again, and you want to start looking at the capable range and the movements you can do, see what's caused it, see what capable range you can go through, what is a controlled condition that you can go through that range, and then slowly build back up.
Yeah.
If you go straight back to the load that you were doing when you injured it, congratulations, you played yourself.
Another one. It's just
Another
one.
So that's for me. Obviously, there's certain stuff that just does not agree with some people. It doesn't matter how much science I go through. It doesn't matter how many times I try and teach someone a movement. Sometimes some people just don't like doing certain movements. And RDL, for an example.
Oh, trying to teach people hip hinge is an interesting one. But that's the beauty of movement, language, all that kind of stuff. Like we will respond to different things, and that comes down to experience, history, all that type of stuff. You know that some people will get things just like that, and some people will take a bit of time, and that does not distinguish if you are good at it or you're bad at it. It just means that cue, that way, that method that has worked and stuff like that isn't the optimal way for you.
Also means that if you fill out any inquiry form for a coach, tell them absolutely everything. Because there is no point coming to a coach and be like, no, I've got no issues, no previous issues. And then you come and you're like, oh yeah, by the way, I've got chronic back pain. It only flares up when I'm doing certain movements. And I'm like, well, for the degree of movements that we will do during the session, or the potential stress that we'll put on certain joints, this is something you really should be saying. And if you are that person, congratulations, you played yourself.
And now we've just finished Mike's 5 minutes of bitter moment, returning back to the 2PTs 1 podcast.
No,
that's what I'm going to do. Every time you go on a little tangent like that, I'm going to return the episode in that kind of way.
Jesus Christ, am I going to have to write a full intro and just put it on record and then just have a button ready to be miles off topic.
You might as well, mate. I'm pretty sure we can write an episode of moments when we both come pretty much off topic, or range moment, or stuff like that.
We'll have one episode and it'd be the tangents. Episode 50 will just be tangents of the two of us.
Probably made more sense with the tangents than we make right now.
Yeah.
But
But no, obviously dialing it back in terms of the injury stuff, that is a big point of when progressions and regressions would be done at the pace of you. Like we said in the pain podcast, me and Miles can see as much as we can see, but we cannot tell you what is going on internally and what you feel. This is why internal feedback from yourself is going to be beneficial to a coach, because they can see if you are obviously going through an arching and everything else, or if something could be causing an injury. If it doesn't, fantastic. If it does, that's an issue, because there's no point us sitting on it and then just going over it and just being like, oh no, it's just not going through that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's like there's always something that can be improved to some degree. I mean, even through training, you're looking towards structural improvements and not just the aesthetic side. Like I need to actually, you've just reminded me something I need to do after this podcast. It's the thing of an injury as well, and people training on top of injuries. And it's like, well, yeah, so I can press so much with this arm, but not as much with this arm. And it's like, and do you feel that that is something acceptable for yourself? No, not at all. It's like, so why are you still doing it? I just didn't know what to do with it, so I just carried on doing what I know.
yeah, but if you don't know, you don't know.
I was just, it's great if you don't know. Well, not great if you don't know. But if you haven't got it by this point, and we're on freaking episode 38, I think there's a certain degree of, I think me and Miles kind of have a little clue on what to do. So if you're still there thinking that, oh, Miles maybe not, apparently just judging basically. If there's a certain degree of, obviously you don't know what you're doing or you don't know what to do, there is always someone there to help. There's not physiotherapists, there's not personal trainers for no reasons. Like, believe it or not, they're there to help, not just to be posting their training footage on Instagram. But then it's also the fact that I don't think progressions and regressions especially isn't sexy, and people don't like what isn't sexy.
No, exactly, and stuff like that. It's no one likes to get told they're gonna have to go. It's some people even, it's not even going backwards. Some people like find when stuff like that does happen, like let's say injuries, or they do find a crack in their armor that's stopping them from a limited factor, should we say, that's stopping them from progressing further and stuff like that. And they feel like they take that as a loss, like there's something wrong with them at that present time. It's perfectly normal. If anything, the fact that you're going through that makes you better than a lot of the people out there, because people will see that and completely ignore that, and they'll push through that and hoping that you'll just wither away instead of taking responsibility of it, owning it, taking the time to deal with it. Go, because there's nothing like, if we would like put a time frame on this, and let's say in 3 months' time you just carried on working to what it is, but in the other 3 months' time, while working on it, you worked on something that was a less regression of it, that what you knew in a long-term phase was going to really help you out. 100% the latter, the one who's been doing all the work, the side work on the hand, will definitely be the one who's just carried on and just kind of gone with it 100% of the time. And it makes training interesting. Like once you get your so what to the top, people might say, oh, well, what's next? It makes it interesting. It makes you, training's not always just about putting weight in the bar and lifting that up or down and stuff like that. Like Max mentioned, there's structures involved in it when it comes to your own body. You're learning things from a mindful side as well. Obviously, your body has to learn to adapt and stuff like that. There's a lot more to it than just weight on a bar, which is what I'm trying to say. And all the opposites and stuff like that benefit many things across the board of life. So I think just for that one moment where you're just like trying to push it a little bit too far, and I say for the sake of it, because someone else is lifting this, or you feel like you should be lifting more, have a look at them other options and see whether that's worth it in the long term. You're looking very puzzled, Mike.
I want to just check the calculations on something. For the majority of people, if they're lifting to a certain degree, they're going to be looking at lifting 25 plus years.
Probably, yeah, probably more. Yeah, I would definitely probably say now, like, I don't know about you in your gym, Mike, but the average people that are going to the gym now are getting a lot younger. And it's good to see. It's good to see. And that's not just males, that's males and females across the board. Like, we're now getting to a point now where weightlifting is becoming a regular thing. And obviously comes with that. It's brilliant because that means a lot more people are getting healthier, a lot more people are seeing the benefits within weightlifting. But then obviously there needs to be a better standards of understanding of biomechanics, understanding movement, range of motion, all that type of body, fancy stuff and all that. There needs to be an improvement on that. So therefore, people who are going to them barbells and dumbbells have a better understanding and then potentially get better results.
I am doing a calculation. So basically, training experience in years, 25 years. That equates to 300 months. So if you took 3 months away to even look in terms of injury issues or anything you're going to have to step backwards to then go forwards even more. So it's actually 1 step back, 2 steps forward. It is 1%. 3 months is 1%.
It's nothing.
So people look at it and be like, I haven't got time for freaking spending months looking at rehab and working on my issues. And it's like, the fuck do you mean you don't? When we're saying 3 months, as in 12 weeks, as in freaking 84 days.
It's better.
What is 84 days in 24 years? 25 years.
Yeah, it's absolute nothing. So if you're making that kind of excuse, it's not a time issue. It's a responsibility type of issue where you're not taking ownership, and obviously therefore and stuff like that. And the one that prepares, the one that doesn't fail. What's the saying now? My English teacher used to always say it to me: if you fail to prepare to fail.
The 6 P's is what I have in my head. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Okay, there's another one. My English teacher did not definitely say that to me, but she said the other one. But they mean the exact same thing. Imagine if my English teacher just said that to me. I'd be like, what? What are you on about? I just want to learn off my cement. Leave me alone.
I just want to learn my ABCs.
I just want to learn my ABCs. Come and help me. But yeah, I think, to be fair, Michael, we've spoke about everything we would kind of go without too much on ranting going on. It wouldn't be an episode of the podcast if we didn't go on a little rant now and then. Leave off our topics.
What PT's one podcast is about.
Exactly. Yeah, it's technically in the bio. But yeah, guys, we'll leave it on that note. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about what we've talked about into the podcast, obviously all of our bios and information is going to be in the bio, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, and stuff like that. If you enjoyed the episode, please to make sure you like and share and subscribe. It really helps us to grow. And if you've got any future topics across the board, by all means, send them our way. We'll be happy to talk about them. But stay safe, guys. Apparently, it's going to get very stormy recently. I've seen probably a bin flown by my window a few times. But yeah, guys, right. Have a lovely weekend because we record this on Friday, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Peace.
Peace.